My name's Maureen Miranda, and I had grid number 2. My grid was off of Cement Hill Road. I came across a mock version of a small mining town, consisting of a miner's cabin, a machine shop, a hydraulic monitor, stamp press, a mining shaft door, and some ore carts sitting idle on tracks, including an ore cart that miners used as a rolling toilet, and many other artifacts lying around. I met Levita Nevis, the owner of the property. She was kind enough to give me the history of the replica of the mining town, of her and her husband, late husband Mike, of 55 years, historically recreated. She had told me that Mike had the love and appreciate everything connected with mining. The couple, both retirees of the forest department, traveled all over the US in search of mining artifacts to complete the feeling of the mining experience. I really got the feeling of the nostalgia of exploring the recreation of the 1930s town. So I was intrigued by the geometrical shapes of the remnant parts of the mining equipment mechanism. Asking permission to access the property, several trees that provided shade caused an angle of my photos, possibly to rethink the shot of the places. I felt that the artifacts justified being printed on black and white and to emulate the sign of the times. Challenge this year was completely different than last year. This year I had so many choices to pick from, which made it really hard to decide on which photo to pick. It was fun. I had a good time, considering the smoke and the hot weather.
Bernadette Sylvester, and I was lucky enough to get grid number 3, just above Nevada City, that featured Sugarloaf Mountain, so I was excited. Grid number 3, as I say, had Sugarloaf Mountain, and I was excited about that because I thought, boy, I'll go up there, I'll get this gorgeous view, a gorgeous landscape shot, and I can do all kinds of things with that off the top of Sugarloaf. Well, then the smoke arrived, and as a result, from Sugarloaf there was nothing, absolutely nothing to see, just grim smoke, as we all know it looked like for a couple of weeks around here. So the next step was to drive around the whole grid, which was mostly north Bloomfield Road, around and down Coyote Street into Nevada City. And you know, there's not much there. There really isn't. So it was a challenge. It was a challenge to find a subject. As we were driving around, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a little house that was tucked behind some kind of bushes, and it was pretty bright blue with kind of a bright yellow trim. And I thought, well, that's got a possibility. That's colorful. That looks like fun. Well, the surprise of the whole thing was, when I parked out in front and walked around, there was nobody at the house at the time. In the yard was this absolutely amazing collection of recycled creatures that had been put together by some artist, apparently, that lived there. And I have no idea who it was, but he had taken a lot of junk and recycled it into the most colorful, creative characters that you've ever seen. It was wonderful. The trick was that there were fences, and so the camera had to be kind of poked through the fence. So the angles aren't quite what I would have liked in the background, but the creations themselves were just so much fun. I think that because this particular piece that I took a picture of was so colorful and so creative, that I decided, rather than go for in tight drama, that kind of thing, I just wanted to show the whole figure, because it was about 6 feet tall. And just as a hint, the head was made out of an old house fan. And then everything was painted pink and blue and red and yellow and white, and very, very creative. It's really fun. It's a fun picture. More fun than anything. I'd like to just say quickly, congratulations on putting this whole thing together again this year. It is such a fun thing to do. I think it really does speak to the creativity that's needed. And well done. You all did well. The committee is great.
I'm Robin Hart, and I received grid number 4. In the grids that were between Nevada City and Grass Valley, it was not an interesting grid. It was challenged from the get-go because the minute I looked at it and I said, oh my, I spent about 3 hours wandering around on the east side of the highway, and there was a lot of dusty rural properties with not a whole lot of interest, tree-lined roads, but, some logs. I mean, it was really getting there. The most interesting building probably in that section of the area was the Northridge, which, if it had been at night, maybe there would have been a few people sitting around, but that building is not photogenically, something I would naturally be attracted to. So I started really getting frustrated, and it was also smoky that day. And so I decided, okay, well, I think 2/3 of my grid are actually on the other side of the highway. So I had to be creative because there was a way across, but you were taking your life into your hands, literally trying to get across the highway with people going at full speed. So I kind of went up and then went all the way back down and got on the other side. And then that was more interesting. I think most of the other property was, again, a lot of rural, but at the bottom, there was an old building, kind of metal building. I think one of the conservancies use it. You could see all their planning stuff on the inside. And I initially took some of that. And then I kind of walked over and there were some residents to the side. And I saw this really cool artistic concrete ribbon wall. And I go, okay, well, there's something added unusual and different. So I decided, okay, this is what I'm going to put my focus on. There was also some other gate parts that had some kind of anthropomorphic tree kind of shapes. And I took some snapshots of those, but I decided quickly that was not what I really want to concentrate on. So I spent about an hour photographing different, angles of it. And then I came home and decided, okay, I'm going to play because it's still not interesting enough for me. So I'm a bit of a Photoshop geek, and anyhow, so I put some extra color into it with a gradient, kind of a transparent gradient, and then I had some silhouette figures that I had designed for something else years ago, and I thought that would be cool to put these people sort of and kind of integrate them into the wall. Like, are they there? Are they not there? Are they painting? Are they real? So I used a little bit of transparency on it so you could see some of the shadowing and some of the texture of the wall. And I thought that made it a heck of a lot more interesting. After that, then I thought, okay, how am I going to output this? Because my printer, unfortunately, does not work anymore. And one of the people in the organization that I've used to print out my work because of COVID, I didn't think it would be appropriate for me to ask them. And so then I was thinking, and I was saying, this would be really cool on fabric since I'm an art quilter. That just seemed like, and it was going to cost me that much to have it output anyway, someplace else. So I thought, well, this is something I could add a lot more to it. So that's what I did. I sent the file over to Real Graphic. They put it on a white cotton fabric. And I used my quilting process where you put batting in between and a back piece of fabric. And then one of the things that I'm noted for on the quilting side of the world is my extensive thread painting. So I made sure that was something on the parts above and below the wall. I did a lot of that to gain texture. And for the most part, where the wall had so much texture, I used a minimum of quilting in there so that kind of stands out. But basically, that's what I did, and I'm much happier with the project after that. I was kind of amazed that I could come up with something that I felt at least was, that titillated my creativity. Okay, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
I'm Mike Shea. So I had grid 6, which encompasses the area between the Elks Lodge and around Upper West Broad Street. It included the area around the co-housing development and the historic Nevada County Cemetery, and crossed over into the Government Center off of Highway 49. So basically what I did is just walk around. I tried to just do it in the early morning and late late evening and took pictures of things that interested me. And I found it was fun exploring an area of Nevada City I'd never really even been to before. So a lot of what I saw wasn't particularly inspiring. So I did a lot of multiple exposures, which I kind of had fun with, and then also like taking slow shutter speeds and panning the camera just to try to get some different effects. I used these techniques on my initial choices that I was going to enter in the competition, which was like a weathered garage door that had an interesting pattern on it, some stacked railroad ties I did multiple exposures on. So you had the railroad ties going one way, and then with multiple exposure, I had it going a different way. There were trees and manzanita bushes that I did this on. And I took a couple of straight photos, which were of a meandering dirt path between the co-housing development and Spring Street. And then also some sunflowers and a fire hydrant on Drummond Street, which were pretty cool. Since the whole photo challenge, I'm kind of reading this as I go. Since the photo challenge was a no-hold-bar kind of affair, I also played around with some pictures I'd taken of silk flowers in the cemetery. So I took these multiple exposures of silk flowers, and then, when I got back to my computer, I thought I'd play around with them. So what I did was I used the perspective wrap feature in Photoshop to mirror the image. I pick half of the image, mirror it over, and then I immediately kind of recognized a couple of faces in the middle of the picture, which I decided I would expand on. So I selected parts of those pictures, and then using the old words, the old terminology, dodged and burned them to bring out things that I thought would be more interesting. And the thing about it was too, there were a couple of faces in there, and I decided there were two main faces, and I decided I would emphasize both of those, which kind of makes the picture a little disconcerting because you're looking at, it's like, which face am I supposed to look at? The big face is the little face, and then there's also a couple of other really small faces in there. But it was just kind of fun for me to play around with them and get something that I thought was maybe a little bit different and that I liked. And so basically that was it. I mean, I had gone through all my photos and decided that picture was the one that I thought was the funnest, and that's what I entered, and that's it. Some special challenges. Basically, it was just finding something. It's like I didn't pick the area, and I probably would have never just walked around it and take photographs. So it was like trying to find something that interested me in this grid, which I did. But that was the main thing. It wasn't anything that particularly jumped out and inspired me. And the way I do my photography, basically I can go months without taking a picture, and then something will grab me, and like I'll go whole hog on it. But I'm not the kind of photographer that spends a lot of time, looking for photos. It's like I wait to see if something grabs me.
I'm Ann Westling, and my grid was number 7. It was downtown Nevada City. And there was so much there to shoot, but I had so little time that it was intimidating. But on that Sunday, if you remember, we were still very much impacted from the smoke from the Jones fire. And so was out early and got lots of pictures of the sun coming up through the cloudy, foggy, smoky area, very orange. And so wanted to incorporate that in the photo. And then walking through the town in Nevada City, it was very quiet in the morning, but it was still smoky. And that sort of overbearing, foreboding mode with nobody in town yet in the morning was what struck me. And so even in the cute Nevada City, I just felt this very, very intense sense of concern about fire. However, when I walked downtown Nevada City on Commercial Street, where Commercial Street meets Coyote Street, the old firehouse stood out just so vivid and white that I thought that would make a really nice picture representing Nevada City and Nevada County community, that it was so upright and stalwart. And even though there were still fears for the fire, still concerns about the smoke, still major concerns about the rest of the fire season, that the old firehouse seemed to represent just what's good about the community, our history, our togetherness, the fact that we all can work together to solve problems. And so that's what I decided to be the main focus of the shoot. The only problems for me was that the lighting came in very strange. It was either too dark or too bright. And plus, I'm not very good in Photoshop. So one of the things I decided to do is to use some of the shots that I had taken for some of the texture layers. And I'd never done texture before, but I got some great shots of the rocks in Callanan Park that were just glowing a vibrant amber color. And then the sun was orange. And so I did have fun experimenting with how you use texture layers. I'm still not an expert, but it was an interesting experience. That's pretty much it for me.
And I am John Sievert in the Nevada County Camera Club, and I had grid number 11. Number 11 started, the very top part of it was Lefty's Grill in Nevada City, cutting straight across, just nicking the top of Miner's Foundry, and then going below to approximately Food and Juice in a square there. So kind of a little neighborhoods of Nevada City off of Zion and Sacramento Street. Well, since I have a love for outdoor nature photography, night photography specifically, I find that fascinating. I saw that I had the Nevada City or Spring Street on my grid. So I thought, wow, what a great opportunity to try to get some night shots maybe of the architecture and the buildings with the lights on inside. So I jumped out on a Sunday night, no traffic, no pedestrians, and snapped away. Oh, the challenges were, I had one guy walking by and kept asking me what I was doing, and I would tell him, and then I put my mask on, and then he wanted to know why I was wearing my mask, and then he proceeded to talk to the other employees watering the plants outside of the Sushi in the Raw, and telling him he's got to go against all this mask wearing initiatives. And I told the guy to please leave, that I'm trying to take some pictures. It was a consignment job I had. I had two options. I had a very cool shot also of the bridge. I think it's called the Spring Street or South Pine Street Bridge, with the stars and the lights coming from the cars, and this beautiful shot of the Miners Foundry. And you know, it had so much depth to it, that picture. There's culture, there's history, there's growth, and there's life. And it had some, you know, creative things going on, the vine going up the trees. So just, to me, it was a no-brainer. I just needed to play with the exposures a little bit, and the picture just popped. Perfect, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I love this challenge. Let's keep it going on every year. It's so much fun to try to make something happen in a short little spot. It's cool.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Triolo, and I had grid number 13. Nevada City, near SPD Market, just off Zion Street. And at first blush, compared to what I think a lot of you had, it looked like a great grid because it has all kinds of businesses and activity. So to get an overall, I kind of drove the whole area before I made any decisions and checked everything out. And didn't find anything really exciting, except I thought SPD looked really good for some people photography. So I pulled into the parking lot and positioned myself straight at the front door and stayed there for a while, hoping to get some really interesting expressions or situations that people might get into on their way in or out of the store. I was there for quite a while and I didn't get much. It was really disappointing, surprisingly disappointing. Also, the store did come out. Somebody reported me for looking creepy. though they continued to let me shoot. They said they didn't have a problem with it. So they were great. They let me continue to shoot. But I decided at that point that I didn't want to, interfere with anybody's shopping experience. So I decided to, and I wasn't getting anything. So I decided to leave. So I went back where I thought was the second best, which there were 2 schools in my grid, and went back to one of those 2 schools and started shooting some things. Nothing was hitting me. So walked around a little further and bam, came upon an interior area of the school that had bars up, gates, like heavy prison gates on either side with lockers on either side. So it was obviously a school with these giant gates, and it just hit me, this is school 2020. There is no school in 2020. We are locked out. And I thought it was perfect. So I spent about an hour there shooting all kinds of different angles and up and down, left and right, some with people, some without. And in the end, I got a shot that I really, really liked. In terms of processing, I wanted to make it look dour. So what I did was I made it black and white, gave it actually a little bit of a platinum tint. I also increased the sharpening to kind of give it an edgy, negative kind of feel to it. And then I also raised the contrast to kind of get that dramatic look more emphasized. So that is my story. It was a good exercise. In spite of having a great grid, it was still a challenge. So I feel for some of you that had lesser grids and had even more of a challenge. It's a tough exercise, but I was happy with what I got in the end. So I hope you guys enjoy looking at it.
I'm Ed Sylvester, and I lucked out and I got a great number this year as opposed to last year. So I was a very happy camper. Grid number 14, lucky number because we were married on the 14th. So. Well, I looked in general terms, was around Holloway and in that region. And so I went on Google Earth and kind of isolated what I thought was the grid. And lo and behold, in the middle of the grid was the Narrow Gauge Museum. So I said, no brainer time. So we went down there, and the museum was closed because of the virus, but we were able to walk around. So I walked around and kind of looked at something, tried to find something I thought was interesting. But way down the track in the back was engine number 5, which it's a beautiful piece of equipment, and a lot of nostalgia with the narrow gauge railroad here. I remember when we first came here in the 60, 70 period when they tore the trestle down right in front of where Rollins Lake Dam is, which was a shame. But anyway, those things happen. So I was trying to find some kind of an angle that I thought was going to be as best background I could get. Took some shots, and then came back here, took a look at it, and said, wow, I got to be able to do better than that. So I went back again and took a few more, just trying to work with backgrounds. You know how that's like. Anyway, so I tried looking at color and different things, and then I finally said, oh, wait a minute, this is an old time issue. So I put it into sepia, and I liked it. And then I added a kind of a vintage look with putting a frame around it that kind of just accentuated the age. So it was fun. I think mostly background. I mean, behind there's an RV camp, and because the way the engine is situated, there's a building right next to it. So it was very difficult to get far enough away to try to get the whole engine in. But I kind of wandered around through there. So it was a bit fortunate that the museum was closed because there was nobody there. So I didn't have people in the view, or I wasn't interfering with people. So all in all, I was happy it worked, and the photos okay in my view. So that's what I did. It's a great, this is a great exercise. It's really fun. I think it accentuates your opportunities to see different parts of the county that maybe you don't. Even though you live here forever, you don't get in a lot of places. So, and it's amazing what people come up with. So yeah, it's great. So thank you for doing that.
Well, I submitted a picture of a stone wall at a street corner. I heard that 4 people on Ridge Road were not wearing masks properly. Being an investigative reporter, I wanted to see the scene of the infraction. Once I arrived, I saw that the authorities had already put up a wanted poster. I snapped a file photo, and when I got home, I realized that I may have accidentally captured one or two of the perps at the edge of my photo. I'll submit my photo to the authorities. If anyone has information about these scofflaws, please notify the authorities. I'll continue my investigation. Hi, I'm Douglas Hooper at grid number 16. It goes along Ridge Road, pretty much from the high school to Eschaton. I scouted and decided to photograph what was one of the most iconic things about that grid, which is the decorative stone walls at both ends of Via Vista. And I decided on the northeast one towards Eschaton. Because of the way I originally set up the photo, I was doing it at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and I was hoping that nobody was calling the police because it's in a neighborhood. The process and challenges were unique because my concept didn't really follow the rules as closely as it should have. So I had to rework the idea partway through. And that made me feel like turning in a photo that looks mostly like a snapshot at first glance. But as you study it more closely, there's more to it.
Hi, I'm Carol Menaker, and I have grid number 18. My grid, and I know my grid pretty well, which was good because I ride my bike up Pittsburgh Mine Road, and I had a friend who lived on Banner Mountain, and I rode up that area all the time. And the first thing I said is, there's nowhere on that road that I'm willing to walk and look for a picture. And then I remembered Prospector Nursery, and I thought they had closed. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna go over there and take pictures of the abandoned Prospector Nursery. There must be some interesting things over there. And I'm interested in small things anyway. I wasn't looking for some stunning landscape, and I thought there's gotta be something over there. And it turns out, I didn't know that on that particular weekend that I went out, they had their pop-up event. And so the store is actually still open, but outside the store, they had vendors, probably a half a dozen or so vendors around the outside of the store with all of their stuff. And so that was like perfect for me because I thought I'm going to find some stuff here and I'm going to get this done, So that's the beginning of the story. Well, I looked at different things, but I've been paying a lot of attention to depth of field. I like pictures and I've been trying to learn more about that. And I did learn some things because I took some pictures with depth of field that I shouldn't have, because when I looked at them, the thing that was out of focus was not what I wanted to be out of focus. So I learned that particular shot was probably not a good candidate for depth of field, or that I had to make some sort of adjustment. But there was a lot of stuff there, cute stuff, knick-knacky things. The people were super nice. They wanted to know who I was and what I was doing. And so it was fun. But the second thing I saw was what I submitted for the picture. And I had the courage to ask the woman if I could move some things around, because there was a lot of stuff on these little displays. And she was, oh yeah, whatever you want is totally fine. And so I looked at it and I took many pictures, but that was the second thing I saw. And that was, I guess, the best picture that I got, and probably the one that I felt the most attached to. Actually, no, because I was lucky to be able to narrow it down that quickly. I think if I had accepted the challenge of walking up Pittsburgh Mine Road, it would have been very challenging. And there is a little cul-de-sac up there, which I didn't know about, but I also thought someone's house was probably back there. So I decided I wasn't going to go there. So I think not about the grid. At first when I looked at it, I thought, uh-oh, but then when I saw the nursery, I'm like, I got this. I would do it again. I'm sorry we missed it last year, and I was really, I thought, I'm just going to do this. I'm not one of your super duper photographer photo club members, but I like photography and I like playing with my camera. And I like, every once in a while, I take a picture that I really fall in love with. And so that's rewarding for me. I'm like the minimalist gal. Next for me is a new cell phone, because my daughter has one and she takes like amazing pictures with the triple camera thing. And I'm like, I got to check that out, because I'll have that with me all the time. And I don't have my camera with me all the time. So more to come.
Hi, I'm Rachel Rosenthal, and I had grid number 19. And so the grid itself was lacking in photographic opportunities, I would say. It is an outside Nevada City. It was mostly residential, probably 95% residential roads with lots and lots of pine trees. You couldn't really even see the houses. So what I did was I drove each of the roads, and there weren't very many in my grid. I drove each of the roads looking for photographs and images and found nothing. So after about an hour, I was actually getting ready to go home, and the GPS took me to the north edge of the grid to catch Highway 49, and I happened to drive by it's Black Bart's Ornamental Ironworks, which was in the very upper right corner of my grid. And that was like finding the gold. So it's like the only thing in the whole grid that I had found that had possibilities and had fantastic possibility. It's like a quarter acre of old gold mining equipment, rusted knight's armor, old cars, all beautifully patinaed with the rust colors on them, and just laying all over. So I went up to the owner, who happened to be outside, and asked if it was okay. And they said, oh yeah, Ray Lurch was here last year. Just help yourself, wander around and shoot what you want to shoot. So that's exactly what I did. So I had many, many things to then photograph. So I spent about an hour and a half wandering around taking some photos. And I knew, sometimes when you get something good, and I had some tire bands. It's more of a abstract look, tire bands that I knew I had some possibilities. And then they had a couple of really old cars that were sitting there, long abandoned. And so I knew between the two of them, I probably had something to work with. But when I got home and I looked at my images, they weren't terrific. They didn't communicate a sense of place or purpose or draw interest in terms of an abstract. So what I decided to do is use it as a learning experience. And so I don't do much work in terms of compositing, as I know Kathy does. I don't do that very much. So I brought in 3 images of different parts of the old car and decided to layer and learn how to blend the layers together. And that's what I ended up doing. And I was pretty tickled, because my first attempt actually snapped into place, and I was very happy with it. When you see it, it's like the door handle and the side of the car and the gas cap cover, all put together in one image. And I was pretty pleased with that. In fact, I went back a few days later and thought, no, I don't want to do that. I want to try something else. And I actually came back to the one I've submitted for the competition. So it's very different than what I normally do by a long shot, but I at least got to learn something about how blend modes in Photoshop, and pushed me, as I think the intent of this competition is, push me outside my comfort zone in terms of really forcing me to be more creative and to learn some new things in Photoshop as well. So special challenges on this one. This grid is whoever gets 19 next year, good luck, but just go directly to Black Bart's Ornamental Ironworks. That's a great place to start, whoever is 19. And as far as that, I'm looking forward to the show. I want to see what other people have done, because folks are so creative in this challenge. And thanks to Kathy and Dave for hosting this year.
Thanks, Kathy. My name is Sheila Ryan. I've been with the Camera Club only a couple of years. I don't live in Nevada City or Grass Valley, but I'm very happy to be part of this challenge and learn my way around. It is number 21, which was up on Banner Mountain. My grid is mostly residential. It was actually, I wanted to find something that was unique to my grid, and I did, but it took some searching. Drove around for several hours up and down streets that were marked no trespassing, private property. That was a lot of fun, but I did find some stuff. Well, my goal was to find something that was unique to the area I was in. So signs, I took a lot of pictures of street signs, and finally settled, I found this sculpture that I really liked, and that's what I settled on. But I did take like 200 pictures, mostly the no trespassing signs, signs and things like that, which made me afraid to go up or down or around those streets. But I didn't run into anybody who said, get out of here, so I was fine. You had said this was a challenge and that we should challenge ourselves beyond just taking the photographs. And so I thought that I would challenge myself by, one, trying a composite in Photoshop, which I haven't done for years. And that's how I started, looking for images that I could composite together that would be unique to my area in Banner Mountain. And I did find them.
I'm Craig Roerson, and am in the 2020 photo challenge. My photo is from grid 22. Now, it was, I drove the entire grid, and there was not much. I mean, I was out in the field for a while, just taking pictures of weeds, right? And not too inspired. And then the very last section I walked into was off the Lytton Trail, up behind the Lytton building, their parking lot area, out in the woods there, and came across these abandoned water tanks that have been completely covered with graffiti. And it was like, oh, yes, you know, this is great. So, well, I pretty much, what I did was I blanketed, I just took pictures of all the graffiti that looked interesting, and then zeroed in on the one image that I thought was really great. It was positive, really beautiful graffiti. The inside of the tanks was covered with graffiti too. I'd have to get a ladder to get in there though. They're big tanks. I don't know, they must use the ladder to get into them. The fact that there really was only one thing that was, you know, a photographic, everything else was mundane, let's put it that way. Just brought it into Photoshop and cropped it, did a little bit of cropping and vignetting, and slightly increased. I was a bright image already, but I slightly increased the saturation just to make it totally jump out. And that was it. It was not difficult.
Hi everyone, my name is Frank Bloxford, and so I was in grid number 26, which is because it was really just a regular neighborhood. I went like 3 or 4 times at dawn on Saturday morning. We had 2 days, a 48-hour period in which to do this, and so at dawn on Saturday, I was there to see, you know, maybe I could get an epic sunrise or something truly awesome, but that was just not going to happen. And I wasn't seeing that. It was really very challenging. And I saw some things that I took some shots of that I went, okay, maybe, but nothing jumped out at me. But what did start to come clear is that the nature, one of the things I really truly love about where we live is the nature that we have here is just truly spectacular and warms my heart and makes me happy. And so as I drove around there, I was just reminded again for the bazillionth time that where we live is truly remarkable, and the trees and the plants are worth recording and sharing. So I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And so what I did was I just started photographing parts of plants, the bark of trees, the leaves, the whatevers. And I gathered together a bunch of assets, as it were, a bunch of photos that I figured that I would put into some sort of composite. But I wanted to do a composite, and I wanted to do an abstract, and I wanted it to be fun. So what I then did was I went to composite the different tree parts together, and that didn't work. And as I blended certain textures with one particular cedar tree, it turned into something truly awesome in my mind. It was wonderful blues and textures, and it really made me excited. And then I added some more textures because now I knew what I wanted to do, and I tweaked with the colors and all that stuff, and I ended up with what I ended up with, and I guess you guys will see that. Special challenges that I experienced in doing this project were, well, one, this was the first project of this sort that I'd done for the club, and so I was feeling a little bit shy about letting my freak flag fly and just doing some sort of really wild abstract or whatever. But also it was just very challenging to come up with an idea because we were asked to get everything, get the photograph out of this area that we were in, and it was just a regular suburb. And like, what am I going to do with that? And so I went at dawn, and I went later in the day with my wife, and I said, honey, please help me. But she just said, wow, this is challenging. And then I came back the next day and the same sort of thing. And so that was really challenging until I started looking at what I had on the computer when I uploaded everything and said, okay, I really am deciding to do a composite of some sort. And then when I started to do that, nothing was working. And it was really quite challenging to not get discouraged about, oh no, I'm not going to have something to do. And also, I started to have a kind of question in my mind about what am I doing? Am I having an ego thing here where I want to present something good because this is my first thing or whatever, or am I just trying to make some art and share a vision of some sort? So what I did was I said, really the latter one, I'm going to do some art and I'm going to share my vision is what's important. So that ego stuff or the fear that goes with those sorts of things, I just threw that out. And that was the big lesson for me, and was a challenge. So there you have it.
Hi, I'm Janice Rosner, and I'm the artist for Grid 27. Grid 27 is a neighborhood in Grass Valley between downtown and Ridge Road. And then sitting in the middle of the neighborhood is DiMautino Park. I drove through all of the streets in my grid, looking at houses. There were some interesting picket fences. There were a couple of interesting doorways. And then lastly, I drove into DiMautino Park, which I was familiar with because my boys had played soccer there at the soccer fields. And looking at the criteria for what best represented the neighborhood, I chose the playground in that I think a lot of things represent the neighborhood, but right now that playground is kind of central to the neighborhood. And so I thought that the photograph that I did of the playground best represented the neighborhood at this particular moment in time. Yes, there was the smoke and the fact that it just wasn't a particularly attractive day. And there was not a lot going on in the neighborhood. I drove all around and saw some possibilities, but finally, came back to the park and walked to the park and found what I thought were my best possibilities at the park.
And how did you decide to process it and create your final project?
When I looked at the raw image in color, it didn't tell the story that I wanted to tell. And I kind of tried a couple of different things and eventually came with the black and white with the playground equipment in the muted color. I chose the black and white because the park is kind of quiet and subdued, definitely. At the moment, the soccer fields are closed and the playground is closed. But then doing the entire image in black and white didn't quite feel right also. So I really wanted the playground equipment to stand out. So I put this playground equipment into their subdued colors, kind of hoping that they would all come back to life rather soon.
My name is Ray Lurkey. I photographed in grid number 30. And by chance, my grid this year was right next to the grid I had last year. So it was kind of easy to get around. There wasn't a lot of interesting material in grid number 30. So I just wandered around until I found something that I liked and found a few pieces of things that could be transformed into something that I liked. While I was wandering around through my grid, I decided to focus on hardscapes, which is something that I like more than anything else, I guess. And it was kind of a smoky, hazy day. And so I just had to look for things that were going to give me enough a shadow to create something interesting. And it is surprising in the little town of Grass Valley how many little things there are if you poke your nose behind buildings, under buildings, over buildings. It was quite fun. Eventually, I was focusing on first an old garage, repair garage, old cars, and then up behind the hospital, there were some interesting old pieces of construction equipment. And that actually was where I ended up with my final piece. Some special challenges in that it was a little bit difficult to determine for sure where my grid began and ended in some corners, because most of the photographable stuff was in one kind of triangle, a corner triangle of the grid. And I didn't want to interlope with someone on someone else's territory. So I was really trying to be careful and look for things. In addition to that, it was, as everyone knows, it was every day was smoky and hazy, and sometimes you got sun and sometimes you didn't, and it was hot, and but it all adds to the fun. Well, frankly, my project is still a work in process. What I finally ended up with was a piece of hardware, and trying to make it look like something a little bit abstract, a little bit minimal without, well, so I just tried softening it up and playing with Lightroom and Photoshop. Challenges here at home in the processing were that we were between computer systems, operating on a new computer with new software. I've been using a really old version of Lightroom and Photoshop Elements for a long time, and have just now started with the normal Photoshop and Lightroom and all of that. So there was a learning curve. So anyway, it's all good, and it's been a great fun.
My name is Jerry Thomas, and my grid number was number 33. The grid that I had was pretty much all of downtown Grass Valley, with some of the peripheral streets on the edges there. I would say one of the things that I tried to do was go to the grid on the day, the day we had, and the light was a key factor in deciding. When I went there, we had that sort of fog, smoke kind of light. So I had originally planned to photograph maybe the murals in Grass Valley with somebody in front of me, or something like a street scene or things like that. But when I drove around, the light was terrible, and there weren't that many people at the time I went there. So then I went over to the South Pine Cafe. And they had some outdoor tables, and there were people sitting there with some colorful umbrellas. And so I took a few shots, and it was okay. I wasn't that excited. It was, colorful umbrellas, but that didn't quite do it. So then I went over to Maria's restaurant, and it was closed, and they had some tables in the parking lot with the umbrellas folded up. And again, there was the color and the way they were lined up, and I started shooting those and trying to get the shadows on the ground. And so anyway, I was doing that, and then a worker came out of the restaurant, they have an outdoor patio. It's kind of a covered patio out there. He opened the door, and I looked in as he left, and I saw the back wall of the restaurant, and that's what I made a picture of. It was, it's kind of a rose color wall, and it's got these three plaques. I don't know how else to describe them. And then there was some dried branches that was sticking up on the side. So I liked the way the light was coming in on that wall and the whole scene. And I just stood there and took a quick handheld, and then I took it home and I liked it. And of course I had to have some help. David Wong helped me process it to fine tune it. And so that was the challenge, was the poor lighting. And I even thought of trying to do night shots. But I thought if the light's terrible during the day, it's not going to be great at night. So I just scratched off the night shots. So that's how I got to the subject. And then when I went through processing it, I didn't like the red. It was like too bright and too kind of garish. So we had to knock down make it more of a pastel than this real harsh red. So we played around with the lighting in Lightroom. I'm sorry, I guess it was Photoshop. And then on one side, the light was a little too dark. So we did some post-processing like that. Nothing fantastic, but I think it made it into a very nice photo. So that's it.
Hi, I'm Bob Brandstrom, and I had grid number 36. It was an interesting residential area in Grass Valley. It's just north of the fairgrounds, north of the freeway. Basically, it's almost all residential southwest of Condon Park. So like everyone, I think I was looking for the money shot. What's the one thing that is just a real grabber? And I looked and I looked and I looked, and lots of fire hydrants and little blue, red, yellow reflectors and a couple cars, and I just kept shooting little things that might be of interest. Finally, the last few minutes I had available, I raced back just before the sunset and was able to get a shot of the setting sun, all red and orange from the smoke, shining through some ponderosa pine trees. And I really liked one of the shots I got there, but I just didn't see how I could edit it to make it really pop and look good. So I let that one go. And then I started thinking, okay, what can I do with circles? Well, it turns out that bright orange and red sun is now in my photo. It's one of the layers. And so I started thinking about how do I composite different images to make it interesting. And I played with that sun circle. There was a little thing hanging from somebody's porch that looked like a cardboard Corona, little thing. And I got a picture of that, lots and lots of pictures. I did get the basketball hoop, and the first place I pulled up to had a Ford Focus in front of me, and I saw the word focus on it, and so I thought, well, maybe that's interesting, maybe I'll use that. And it turned out those were the things I ended up with. And so for me, the big challenge of this whole thing, and I really appreciate the emphasis from the organizers, push yourself, do something that challenges you, because basically I'm learning to use Lightroom. I've never used Photoshop, and I knew if I wanted to do a composite image with layers, I had to get up to speed with with Photoshop a little bit. So that's really where I did my editing and was able to come up with an image I liked. The basketball hoop, I tried working with that. It just didn't make the cut. It made the image too complex and too busy. So I took it out. And I'm happy with what I got as sort of a creative, playful image. Not in the grid itself. I ran into a couple people, talked with them. There was one neighborhood that said it was a residential trailer area, and they said, or mobile home, and it said, private property, residents only. And I just went ahead and went in there and walked around and took some pictures, and nobody seemed concerned, but no real challenges, just trying to find a good subject. Well, I had sat through a class that you had taught on compositing last year, and it's like, okay, I know Photoshop can do this. And for me, it was just, I had this image in mind of what I wanted to do with the word focus and how I could shape it to look like it was focusing in on, part of that radial structure of the circle. I wanted the color of the sun, and I liked the texturing that the little, Corona thing gave. And so for me, the real challenge in figuring it out was, how do I do all of this in Photoshop? I've never done that before. And so I had a couple videos I watched, and Dee did a little coaching for me of here's how you do this, here's how you do that. And then I came home and just started from scratch and started playing with it. And took me a while, but I learned how to select kind of complex images. The basketball net was the real challenge. Actually, and the word focus was a challenge, because the car was dirty, and so there in some places there weren't clear edges to the word focus, and I had to play with it a lot to get the selection to look pretty decent. So I feel like I really learned a lot, which I think is maybe the point.
You
Hi, my name is Ellen Davis, and I had grid number 38, and I was very pleased to be part of this project. It was I had a lot of fun. So it was just like a single square grid, and it was in Grass Valley. It was mostly neighborhoods. So the north border of my grid was like right where Safeway is, and then the southern border was Empire Street, and then the western was kind of near the bowling alley under Henderson Street, and then the other, like the eastern or western, anyway, and then the other border was like around Mill Street. So, of course, there were a lot of neighborhood houses, but I tried to find areas in the neighborhood that I've never really visited before or explored. I saw an empty lot and it was wooded and there was a trail, and I found a homeless camp. But then the neighbor came to investigate, and then we had a conversation, and she was a very nice lady, and we had made new friends, and took her portrait of her and her husband. But the photo that I actually ended up going with was way on the other side of the grid, which was near the bowling alley. And I don't know if anybody uses it or if it's open, but anyway, it's still there. And on this bench in front of the bowling alley, I found 2 figs just sitting there, and a third that had been ripped open. And it just kind of had like this red seeded texture that was just really at odds with the beautiful purpley blue of the plums. And it was like, so that was my subject. And then on the bowling alley, there was a worn wooden staircase, and I used that as a backdrop. And so I did a lot of little still lifes with these figs. I think it was, actually it was really hot, and I do not like the heat. So for me, trying to find, trying to find the right time of day to go where I would still have enough light, but it wasn't too hot. And, but I did go different times of the day, and I cranked the AC as soon as I was done. But I don't think I had anything super challenging in that regard. So I always like to push my post-processing, and say, I can make a beautiful print, and I love a beautiful print, but I will always like to push it a little bit and see what I can do. So what I did with this one was, instead of doing a pigment ink print with my printer, I actually did a color laser copy, and I'm using that to transfer it onto watercolor paper. And so I'm still figuring out which one is going to transfer process is going to work, but one is like a gel, and I lay it onto the gel and let it dry, and then I rub off the paper. And then the other one is I lay it down directly onto the watercolor paper, and I use acetone to rub it through. And I might have to touch it up with a little bit of watercolor. So we'll see what happens. Well, thanks.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Weitzman, and I had grid number 39 for this year's event. And I was, the grid 39 is a part of town that's centered pretty much around Memorial Park, and it's over right on the 174 corridor on the east side of 49. And it's a part of town that I've driven through many times, but had never really stopped to look around for any reason. So it was an interesting spot from that regard. And just like last year, I started the whole event by just sort of driving through the entire residential and downtown, the part of town that I was in, just looking for interesting things. And that's really what I did for the first couple of hours was, just cruise around, try to get a good vibe. And Memorial Park is a part of the grid that certainly drew my attention. I had never set foot in the 14 years that I've been here into Memorial Park. And so after driving around for a bit, I stopped near Memorial Park, got out. And the park was pretty empty given the social distancing that we're going through. There are a handful of people in various groups, and I tried to avoid them just because I didn't want to approach them. I grabbed my camera and just started walking around trying to understand it. And the interesting thing about Memorial Park that I didn't realize, which is really what I tried to capture in the image that I found, was that there's this wonderful memorial, which is why it's called Memorial Park, but to all of the servicemen and women who've been a part of Nevada County really since World War II. I think I saw many of the memorials, and there's an entire wall that I found, and a variety of memorial stones that were around. And once I found that, I realized that this was the image that I wanted to try and capture for this year's event. And so that was my inspiration. And then it was just down to trying to find what part of the park, what angle, what was the mood, what was the vibe that I could take away from that. And so I like to do long exposures. I like to take a lot of landscape. So, this was sort of in my area of interest and expertise. So I had the tripod. And so really, I just tried to find the correct composition and lens to put on the camera. And then it was just a matter of hunting for that right special composition, given all of this great inspiration. The other thing why this became important to me is that my son is a Marine, and he's in his third year. And so certainly in the time that we've been in a military family, I've become more interested in military history and in the sacrifices made by those that have given their life for our freedom. And so really that's what I tried to capture in my image, was a sense for memorializing the folks that have given their lives to support our freedom. And if you ever get in town, or if you've never discovered Memorial Park, I would highly encourage you to find a moment to head down there, park the car, get out, walk around, and plan on spending at least an hour walking through all of the memorial part of the park, where they've got all of the tributes to all of our men and women who've been in the service. So really that was my inspiration. And then really in processing my image, I really tried to make it a little bit moody, try to focus on I found a beautiful there's a storage shed that has a big American flag and service emblems of all of the 5 services, and I tried to put that in the background with one of the memorial tokens in the front, and the American flag, of course. And so it really just became a very patriotic image that I think I produced. So that's the story of my adventure this year. It was a wonderful challenge again, which is what I love about this, stepping into a part of town that I've never been to before, and looking for inspiration and really trying to capture the essence of all the wonderful things that we have hidden in our county.
I'm Jeffrey Alstatter, and I was in grid 43, and that was Empire Mine. There are 2 parts. There's the mansion and the beautiful buildings for the owners, and then there's the mining part and the trails. So actually there's 3 parts. And the mining part also includes the blacksmith shop that wasn't open because it was just too hot. I thought I would start with the, where most people start, with the nicer part, the buildings. And then I went over to the mining part. I asked one of the rangers about what was the best thing to see on the trails, and he told me the bridge. So I found the bridge and I took some photographs of that. I wasn't happy with what I took the first day. I didn't set enough depth of field, and so I came back the next day and I used the tripod on every shot, and I did the maximum depth of field I could, and they were much better, believe me. No, actually, the only challenge was it was really hot, and the second day was pretty smoky. In terms of lots of people there, they weren't, even though it was a Labor Day weekend. So that was good. I was able to shoot everything I wanted. Different time of year would be better for the roses. They were kind of wilted. There were so many good photos that I thought a collage would be best. And there was an exercise in the club for doing panoramas. And I had one, but I didn't process it right. So after that, I spent another month on my own taking my own panoramas just for fun. So I did 4 panoramas for this. And it's good to take lots of pictures. The more pictures you take, the better you get.